Hi there, I'm Michael Gagnon, and today I'm going to be talking about the causes and repercussions of precocious puberty. So to really kick off what this is, precocious puberty is a condition that isn't really addressed in our society, but I think it's relevant to the modern day because it has a wide array of causes and because it has some pretty serious effects on children who experience it. So the topics I'm going to be talking about today are I'm going to start with a basic overview of just regular puberty, how that works in a nutshell, and precocious puberty, and just summary of what that is. The types of precocious puberty, also going to be talking about the causes that they've identified that are pretty clear of precocious puberty, the possible links between thimerosal and this condition, and the consequences of the condition on children who experience it. Then I'm also going to be covering 4 different countries, their research on this. I researched the United States, the United Kingdom, China, and Denmark. And then we're just going to get into our conclusion. So, what does puberty look like? Well, according to Doctors Kota and Ijaz, who wrote an article in the National Library of Medicine, the what we call puberty is just a time of growth, acceleration, and development of secondary sexual characteristics. There's also a psychosocial development during this time, and it's important to point out that genetics and nutrition do play a very large role in how it progresses. The organs that trigger and sustain puberty include the gonads, the hypothalamus, and the pituitary glands, as well as the thyroid, but it's not mentioned quite as often. And normal puberty should begin around 11 years for girls and then 12 years for boys. So now that we've gotten regular puberty out of the way, what is meant by precocious puberty? Well, precocious puberty is basically when girls start puberty at 8 years old and boys start it at 9. So 2 years or so before they should. Actually, 3 years. So yeah, there's a significant gap. So what are the types of precocious puberty? There are 2 types, central and peripheral. According to the Cleveland Clinic, central precocious puberty is a lot more common. It is caused by a child's brain releasing androgens, those are sex hormones, too early, which just triggers change, just like grown-up change. And the peripheral precocious puberty is usually caused by some sort of problem with reproductive organs, and it can also have something to do with a child's adrenal glands. So that's kind of a flyby, 1,000-foot overview, but here are the identified causes of central peripheral precocious puberty. So the Mayo Clinic talks about both, says that specific causes that have been identified for central precocious puberty can involve brain or spine tumors, brain changes at birth, exposure to radiation, suffering injury to your spinal cord or brain, this McCune-Albright syndrome, which is pretty nasty stuff. It has to do with discolored bones and some stuff that has to do with your growth, and it's pretty bad. I would recommend, if you're interested, looking into that further, because that sounded like something that could just be a research topic in itself. But other genetic disorders are hypothyroidism. And then for peripheral, it mentions tumors in the pituitary or adrenal glands, McCune-Albright syndrome again, exposure to testosterone or estrogen. There's products that can contain chemicals that are similar in structure to those hormones, or tumors in the sex organs. And according to a Dr. Geyer, wrote a journal article about this, Mercury is a known endocrine disruptor, and it can increase the chances of experiencing precocious puberty. Thimerosal is a compound that's found in a lot of vaccines, and that's also usually where mercury is. So there's a connection between these types of vaccines that use thimerosal and have traces of mercury and cases of precocious puberty. So what are some of the consequences of precocious puberty? So again, according to that Dr. Kota and Dr. Ijaz, some of the problems can be like short stature, significant emotional, behavioral issues. You say, well, what does that have to do with growth? Well, Doctors Carroll and Leilu wrote an article in 2004, basically said, well, they kind of explain the growth thing as well. They say that growth plates close sooner than normal for children with precocious puberty because for them, puberty starts early, but then it ends early as well. So they don't have as big a window of growth as someone who just goes through the normal stages of puberty. And the reason why there can be issues with emotional stuff and behavior is because children are not psychologically prepared. I'm going to skim through the United States section because, to be honest, according to the National Institute of Health, this is really not a problem for the United States. It's only like less than 1% of our population experiences this. So there's been very little research conducted in the US on precocious puberty. Sort of a similar story with the UK, very low prevalence. Kingston Hospital gave a thing where they basically talk about like it can run in families, so the whole precocious puberty thing could be kind of genetic, which makes sense because we've already covered regular puberty in the way that it can be influenced, it said, by genetics and nutrition. So it makes sense if someone in the family experienced precocious puberty, then their children will likely inherit that genetic. I wouldn't call it like a issue, but more an abnormality. And there really isn't much that the UK has to say other than that. China, on the other hand, Dr. Zhang says that the prevalence of precocious puberty is very high. He did a study, they checked in Kufu, China, Shandong province. They determined that being overweight or obese greatly increased the chance of these kids experiencing puberty really early. A completely separate group, Dr. Liu, discovered a very similar thing, that being overweight or obese greatly increased the chance of experiencing precocious puberty. Research from Denmark, there were 2 studies. Dr. Ernst, he determined that there were a lot of prenatal factors like smoking, assisted reproduction, gestational diabetes, all that kind of stuff that could increase the chances of precocious puberty. And a study by Bronner and Bush, 2 doctors in 2020, they said that after examining this cohort, they found that over the last 20 years, the number of cases of precocious puberty has greatly increased. But it's unclear exactly why these cases have increased in Denmark and China so much, and yet in the United States and the UK, it's like just a static number that's very low. So to wrap up, precocious puberty has a number of causes and effects. It can be genetics, you can be overweight, there can be gender, environmental influences, prenatal influences. Its effects on children can include stunted growth and emotional behavioral problems. Long-term psychological effects, they really don't know what it's going to do to children as they age, just reach adulthood. And the same thing goes for this deal of difference in prevalence rates. We really don't know why the UK and the United States versus Denmark and China are so different, but they're doing more research as we speak, so stay tuned. They might come out with something. I appreciate y'all taking the time to listen to this presentation. Thank you. Have a nice day.